It is about 1:30 in the morning, and technically now it's the start of a new day. It's May 30th, 2025, and today was a day for me that was just filled with chaos in a way. From the moment that I started my day, I got a phone call about stuff with my work, and then that, caused me to have to make a bunch of other phone calls and deal with all this other business, and I was getting the runaround, and I was getting frustrated, and I already don't sleep well. It's just an issue I've had for years. Insomnia is just a problem that I have, and I haven't really been able to fix it yet. And so obviously all of these things don't help with that. And there's been just, so much conflict in the universe. It just seems like so many people around me are experiencing conflict and struggle and experiencing strain, and it's causing anxiety, and it's causing stress, and it's causing, fear. And there's all these things that are happening with people. And for me as a person, my whole life, even I remember back being a really, really young kid, I just had it in me, this want and need to take care of the people that I care about. And, even when I was little, I would, take care of my dad, and I wanted to, look after him and help him, and also, my brother, and I wanted to be everybody's best friend. And, I just remember when I was a kid feeling at times even overwhelmed, because I would just pick up on so much emotions from the people that I was around. And sometimes looking back, I think that I had trouble discerning what emotions were mine and what emotions I was absorbing from those around me because of what they were experiencing and what they were going through. I would just latch onto that for some reason, in my want to help and heal. I would latch onto their pain, and I would take it on in a way to myself, and it would affect me and sometimes overwhelm me. And then I would feel depressed, or I would feel anxious or angry, or whatever the emotion was that person I was dealing with was experiencing. I could feel that very clearly. And it's something I've had to practice to kind of shield myself from that and figure out, what's mine and what's going on around me, and am I picking that up, and is that what I'm feeling? And it could be really confusing sometimes. And, it's easy when you start to get overwhelmed by all of these circumstances that happen in everybody's life. Everybody goes through things. There's always going to be something for someone going on. Life's not perfect. Life's not fair. But we still have to deal with it. We still have to live. And I used to always ask myself when I would, feel bad about things, and things weren't, going the way I wanted to, or whatever, I would stop sometimes, and I would think like, gosh, if I wouldn't have made that decision, this wouldn't have happened, and I wouldn't be having this conflict. Or if I wouldn't have, done that, or if I wouldn't have met that person, if they wouldn't have come into my life, I would be spared all these problems and all this stress and all this anxiety and all this, negative stuff that I don't want to experience. if I wouldn't have done that or met that person, it wouldn't have happened. I would be okay. And I've been really thinking about that a lot. And, right now, there's been a lot of conflict in my life. And, and it's making me feel again, like, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? What is it about me? What am I putting out there into the world that's making people think this about me or feel this about me or, want to have this conflict with me? And I know my true nature, I know my true spirit, and that was not my intention at all. And no matter how hard I try to explain myself, I can't get through. The message isn't getting received. And in some times, it actually gets worse. And then I'm just feeling like defeated, Oh, what can I do now? I already, tried to clear it up, and I tried to fix it. And I understand, we're all human and misunderstandings are going to occur, and that's okay, but let's talk about it, but some people are just not in a place to be able to do that always. Everybody comes with their own baggage. And that affects us, and it can change us to see the world in a certain way or to see other people in a certain way and to expect things to go a certain way because that's what's happened before, and why would now be any different? And I don't think that people or situations or problems occur in our life as a way to punish us or break us. I think that it's always the goal, or it should be the goal in life, to never stop growing, to never stop trying. And I'm trying to be more forward-minded in my ways of thinking and my perspective. But it gets really hard to do that when you feel like your integrity is being questioned by others, or your character is being questioned by others, or even that feel at times you're being attacked maybe. And I don't think that these things happen for no reason. I do think that God has a plan for us all, and we don't always see it. We're not supposed to always see it. It'll make sense at the end when our life is over and we're looking back, and then it'll all add up. But, while we're here, we can't always predict things, and we can't always change things, and there's only so much that's in our control. So then why does God, if he means everything that he does, why does he choose to put us through struggle or put people into our lives that could be mean or be cruel or be abusive? So, back to why. Why do we have to experience these really painful things if God is on our side and he's supposed to protect us? And that was really something that in my, late or mid-teens, I would say, through my even adult life, that I would feel like that sometimes, like, okay, am I being punished? I must have deserved this. If this is happening, like this must be my punishment, and and I deserve this for some reason, even if it didn't make sense. But when God is trying to teach us a lesson, if there's something, a potential that he sees in us that we may not even realize yet about ourselves, we're going to be challenged. We're going to be tested. And it's up to us to have the strength, to have the faith, to trust that God is not putting us through this to break us. And truly, no matter what storm you're in, if you got to be in a boat in the middle of a rough sea, you might as well be in the boat with God. That's really the safest place. Where else can you go? You're in the middle of the ocean and the waves are crashing over you and the wind is picking up. There's no land around. There's no one to rescue you. So what do you do in that moment? Do you just give up, jump off the boat, just give up? Or do you have a little faith and trust that as long as God is in the boat with me and he's on my side, I can endure this storm and I can make it through. And at one point, nothing is permanent. Everything is temporary. The storm will pass and you will get through it. But you might have to wait it out a little bit and it's gonna suck in the meantime. And so now, I'm sitting here feeling, defeated because I feel like I've been trying so hard to just take time to not make the same mistakes I used to make before. My biggest fear is I don't want to fall apart again. I don't want to be the girl that has a bad day and I'm hiding away from the world and I'm under the covers in my bed in the dark, not interacting with my family, not speaking to my husband, and I'm not cooking dinner and I'm not, doing the things that I want to do for my family. And that's where I would get, at those times where I would feel defeated and I would feel overwhelmed. It would push me to that point where I just would want to shut away from the world. So at the end of this day that had been, just a rough day. We all have bad days. Today was one of those for me. And I was just trying to cope with it. And, but, sometimes we trigger things in other people and we're not aware of it. And then it can create a problem. And that's kind of what's, happening right now with me and my husband. There's things sometimes that happen with me that he doesn't understand. And there's things that happen with him that I don't understand. And, it can come, sometimes it can come off as the person is being, they're not trying to understand you, or you're being disregarded, or they just don't care. And that's where I kind of felt like that for a moment, and it made me feel sad and bad, and I had just already had a bad day, and it was like this was just the cherry on top that I really didn't need or want. And but I didn't want to be sad and mad and feel this way, so I took a moment to myself to just pray instead of getting all wound up in my emotions and having a big argument with my husband, and just messing up the whole vibe of the house. I took a time out and I said a prayer. And it's the same prayer that I say, probably 100 times a day sometimes. And that's, please just help me through this time and allow the process to work. And let people see and feel what my true intentions are. If I'm being misunderstood, you know my heart, you know my spirit, you know what I meant. And I can't convince anyone of anything, but you can. And then I give it up to God. So, but I still didn't feel better right away. I still felt the same way, even though I had said this prayer with, a lot of intention. And then I started thinking about, well, why do these things keep, why? That's always going on in my mind for some reason. And I started thinking back to all the people that I have encountered in my life and all the experiences that I've had. And my mother was the kind of parent who was all about keeping it real and teaching us the things that she thought were important for us to be able to not only survive, but thrive in the world when we were out on our own. So even being really young kids, my mom would be putting us through drills, what would you do if scenarios on a daily basis. Like even in the car, even if we're at the grocery store, no matter where we were at, my mom was always putting us onto alert. Like, okay, look, if this goes down, if this was to happen, what would you do? If you're in this situation and this person says this to you, how would you respond? What would you say? And these were actually really valuable lessons that I didn't appreciate until I was much older, because when I was young, I was thinking like, okay, all these other moms are like singing songs with their kids and they're playing, games with their kids and all of that stuff. And, my mom was always, running us through these drills. And, but it made me think a lot, and it helped me as an adult, because I realized that I'm a person that suffers with a lot of anxiety, and my fears set in real quick. And then it used to cause me to actually freeze, and I couldn't think and I couldn't react. And so, but remembering back to, my mom and these, drills that she would put us through, I started using that in my day-to-day life to control my anxiety. And then I used it in my career to control my anxiety. I would think with every patient that I would encounter, and whatever their diagnosis was or whatever their, issue was that landed them in the hospital, I would think, what is the worst thing that can happen to this patient with this going on? What is, the complications that could potentially happen? What are the worst, possible complications, and what do I need to look out for if that starts to happen? And what am I going to do about it? So if I could do that, real quick before I started my shift, after I got report, I would just go through, we call it our brain, our sheet, our worksheet that we write everything down to keep things organized. Because there's a lot to remember and keep straight when you're taking care of 5 patients, and they're all complex and complicated. And I would look at that, and I would, study it, and I would think, this is the worst thing. This is what I'm most worried about. This is who I'm most worried about. And if this was to go bad, this is what I'm going to do. And if I had thought about that in advance, then if it happened, I wouldn't panic. I already had a plan. I didn't have to react with emotion. I could respond and use my brain and take action and take control of the situation. If I let my anxiety take over, I have no control. I can't think straight. I can't save this person's life. And that was what was at stake when I was at work. And then I would practice that in my day-to-day life as well. And I would then ask myself too, if I was feeling anxious in a situation or whatever it was, I would stop and think, what am I really afraid of? And what's the worst that can happen? Am I fearing that I'm going to get hurt physically? am I going to get hurt emotionally? Or what is it? And sometimes your brain tricks you because the fear sets in, the anxiety sets in, that takes control. And then you start to think that these threats are real. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's your emotions that have caused you to believe that there's a threat there when there's not. So if I could do that to myself and check myself, I can control my anxiety, and I could, be calm, and I could put myself through situations that might have, caused me to freeze in the past, and I could get through it, and nobody would ever know that I was super anxious. And I'm thankful that, I had a mother like that, because my grandma, who is my biological father's mom, she was the one who was religious. My dad was not. He was, had a lot of very negative views on the church. But my grandma never, she would just say what she thought, and she was so loving and always made me feel like I was special and I was loved, and I just loved my grandma for that. But she would always say we pick our parents before we're born. When we're up in heaven, we pick our parents. So even if you think your parents are bad, you picked them for a reason. That's what she would tell me. And so, I'm thankful now that I'm older and looking back that I had a mom like that taught me all of these things and made me think like this and made me, challenge myself so that I can overcome some of these struggles that I have, ended up experiencing later on in life. And then I think about another woman who I crossed paths with. And when I was 18 years old, I had just graduated high school, knew I was planning on going into the medical field. And I wanted to have a job that would help me get experience so that later when I graduated, it would be easier for me to get a job as a nurse. So I happened to be reading the Penny Saver, which is like an old little community newspaper. And I don't know how I came across it, but there was an ad in the Penny Saver, and it was for a caregiver, a private in-home caregiver for a woman who was a quadriplegic. And this woman, even though she was a quadriplegic, and this was caused from polio, it wasn't from an accident, she wasn't a spinal cord injury or anything like that. She was actually, she had suffered polio when she was an infant and never walked. She was always in a wheelchair. And because of the polio, it caused her to become progressively weaker as she aged. And so I called her on the phone, and I had to leave a message. And, she was looking for a caregiver to come in. She lived independently in her own home. She was a speech pathologist, because she said, just because my body doesn't work, there's nothing wrong with my mouth, there's nothing wrong with my brain, and I'm good. I could talk forever. So she went, graduated college, got her master's degree, and she was a teacher in a local school district as a speech pathologist, and she would work with special needs kids. So she lived alone, but she needed attendant care because she couldn't do things physically for herself. And so I called her to express interest in this position. I left her a message, and I didn't want to leave the message because I was like, oh my God, this is so strange. I'm literally calling a stranger, and I'm going to go to their house, and I'm going to take care of them. And it was just something really new for me. So, but she called me back, and she wanted to interview, and she invited me to her home so that I can meet her and her service dog. She had a canine companion dog. And so the moment I met her, we clicked, and she was the first woman that I had a true adult friendship with. Even though she was my boss, technically, I was her employee. I was going to her house to provide care services to her. And I would tell her, it's so funny because I come here every day and I get you up and I shower you and I dress you and I transfer you to your wheelchair and I feed you your food because she got too weak to, feed herself and hold the spoon. But I look up to you so much and I've learned so much from you. Like, I don't even see you as disabled. I wouldn't ever see the wheelchair. And it was so funny, and we used to joke about that a lot because, it was like our therapy sessions with each other. I would come and, I was doing these things, taking care of her, getting her up, dressing her, showering, all this stuff. But we would talk the whole time I was there, and we would talk about so many things. And she taught me so much about, empowering myself as a woman and seeing how this woman had struggled with, a severe physical disability where she could not move, but she accomplished so many things. A lot of the things that I had the dream of one day accomplishing. She owned her own home. She lived independently. She had her master's degree. She got her dream job. These were all things that I wanted too. And so we just aligned. We would call each other soul sisters, even though I was only 18 and she was 50 years old. And but then she died. I worked for her for 9 years, and she passed away. And that was one of the most significant losses I had experienced yet in my life. And I thought, like, oh my gosh, now who am I going to go to? Who am I going to learn to? Who is going to replace this person that was so important to me? And why did God have to put her in my life and then take her away? And I felt, resentment in a way about that at the time. And, it's just unfortunate. Some people in life just experience a lot of loss, and I have been one of those people that I've experienced a lot of loss in my life. Some of it, not all bad. Some was by choice. Some I chose to step away from this relationship and close that door to never open it again. Some things we just drifted apart. But then there was also some that were not by choice. And her death was one of them. Nobody wanted to lose her. She was so, she meant so much to so many people. She was, everybody looked up to her. And, and I was always inspired by her. Like, I would always tell my mom, I have nothing to complain about, because she never complained, no matter what she was going through, no matter how weak she was or how much pain she was having. She achieved all these things, and she continued to want to grow and continue to progress. And she wrote a book even, and she couldn't even write. She had to talk on a mic, and she would use a program on her computer that would translate her talk to text, and then she used that to write her book and published it on her own. But anyways, another person that was really important to me, that I had this strong bond and connection to, who left too early, who left too soon, and it was really devastating to our family. And this person was my younger brother's best friend from childhood. He was like my mom's other son, and even though we're really different as far as our personality goes, he was a Marine. He was a large, tall, stocky man. And, he was real intense, and, he didn't smile all the time, and he talked real fast, and he chain smoked cigarettes and drank too much, Monster energy drinks. He always had like a Monster or a Rockstar or a Red Bull in his hand, and he drove this, muscle car that was real loud, and, he just had this intense energy. But for some reason, the reason he fit in so well with our family is, we just got each other. We saw situations and things in different ways. And, and I always kind of felt this inability at times when I was younger to sometimes fit in with my peers, because I felt like, well, I don't think like they do. I think this way. And then because what I thought wasn't popular, I was weird, you know? So I accept that now that I'm older. I'm fine with it. But when I was younger, I did feel at times like I was, bullied and kind of shunned because I was different. But George was the same way. He was like that. He could see things in the way that I could see them, and we can have these conversations about, all kinds of stuff, about theories, about the world, about, our insights and stuff. And we just got each other. We had the same sense of humor. He got my jokes. I got his jokes. He would be able to keep up with the conversation with my mom and my brother and with me. And, and he would be at our house every single day. And I just would expect him to be there. And then, he dealt with a lot of things himself. And he passed away too early. And I was so mad at the time, feeling like this is so unfair. Like, why him? Why? It didn't make sense. And I had so much guilt too. And, and then I kept thinking, even there were times where I would be, wishing that I could talk to, Leanne, my old client, or him, my brother's best friend, because we just all got each other. And, and I would always feel better after I talked to them. And now these people were gone and I didn't have anybody else, and I just feeling like this is not fair. And then people were also being placed in my life that were causing me a lot of pain. And I just felt like, okay, like, you're taking all these good people away. You're putting all these shitty people in my life. Like, why? What's going on? So then, when I was praying, the message that I got was, everybody is your teacher, and you are also a teacher. And everything that happens, if you look at it from the perspective that God would look at it, whereas, I am not putting this person in your life to harm you. I'm not putting you through this situation to break you. I love you enough to know that you are capable to overcome this, and you will get better and you will get stronger when you get through this. And you're going to learn a whole lot about yourself if you do this, but just have faith. Because if you think about it, Jesus has already overcome. If you believe in that, and it makes sense to you, Jesus sacrificed himself on the cross for us. But he overcame death. He faced the worst thing that could ever happen. What do we fear the most in life is, of course, things can get really bad. But ultimately, like, the biggest fear, I think, for anybody is, the worst thing that can happen is you're not here anymore. You're dead. And Jesus overcame that. And he was resurrected to show us that if he could overcome death, if he could overcome the ultimate struggle and still have love for everybody and to accept everybody, as long as you're willing to accept him and follow him. He's not out here trying to teach you anything bad. It's all about how to grow in yourself and make a difference in the world, and for us to all come together and to get along. So when I put that into my own life now, you know, I'm not going to get angry and hold a grudge and, you know, feel like I'm being attacked or I'm not being understood and this isn't fair and I wish this just never happened. I'm going to really reflect in those moments and think about, you know, what do I need to learn and how can I overcome this? And I'm going to keep praying on it until I figure it out. And just know that, you know, we can't undo the past. We can't always, you know, make the pain go away. But you do have a choice. And if you think about it, if God loves you enough to empower you, to give you strength to overcome, then you have to also love yourself enough to believe in that too. And sometimes that's really hard when there's a lot of doubt around you and you feel like people are trying to break you down. Because they can't. As long as you stick to your guns, so to speak, and you do not waver, nothing can break you. Nobody can break you. And you're not just, you know, a target. And don't ever put yourself into the place of feeling like you are a victim. Because God is here for those that are broken. If you're already perfect, what more do you have to learn? Why do you need to seek advice from anybody if you already figured everything out? So no, it's not I accept you because you're perfect and you never did anything bad and you never made a mistake. As long as you can accept your responsibility and take accountability and reflect and challenge yourself to overcome and to grow and to learn. Every challenge and every situation that you go through and every person that comes into your life that you may feel at times like, I just wish this didn't happen. If it didn't happen, you wouldn't be who you are today. So yeah, I'm going to sit with that for a while. And I'm going to really try to embrace that. And I know it's not going to be easy, and I'm going to have moments where I'm going to start having that doubt, and it's going to start creeping back up, that negative thought pattern. But I have to remind myself, and that's why I'm saying this out loud, that in those moments I will choose to not react, but respond and take the time to pause and pray and ask for guidance and ask for peace.